All right. Clock has struck 3 p.m. Central European Time, and I want to make sure that those of you that are here on time get rewarded and we get through today's content, as we do have a packed session to be able to help everybody here gain 10 tips for building cool and quantifiable ESG assessments. I appreciate you all joining me here today, wherever you might be sitting around the world. My name is Sam Jenks. I'm the Chief Growth Officer at Kodiak Hub, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. In addition, I'm joined by my co-host, Charlie, the office dog. So if you hear a bark in the background, it's him just giving his opinion on today's content, and he can be rather opinionated. I'm also joined by my trusty colleague, Richard Teuchler. Sorry, Richard, you didn't get a picture here. I guess Charlie beat you out on the slide. But Richard will be instrumental in issuing a few polls during today's session. So again, keep your fingers ready to answer on some of those polls during today's content. Short about Kodiak Hub, for those who don't know about us, Kodiak Hub is a suite, supplier management suite in particular, that's helping procurement, sourcing, sustainability, and quality professionals just like you to build smarter and more sustainable supplier relationships with deeper buying insights in the form of more robust ratings and analytics. We have an ecosystem of applications and modules, as seen on screen here, that our users can be able to plug and play to pretty much manage supplier information all the way to driving impact, managing risk, compliance, performance, and collaboration all from one place. And during the course of this session today, of course, you guys will all become a little bit more acquainted with the Kodiak Hub solution and better understand as well, how we can be able to help you guys as well to build some cool and quantifiable ESG assessments. On to the agenda for today's webinar. During these next 40 to 45 minutes, I will try to thoroughly cover the following points. ESG, why it matters, and the role we play. Moving into the main event for today, those 10 tips for building cool and quantifiable ESG assessments. We'll end in a short product video as well to demonstrate Kodiak Hub's supplier management solution and also display how a modern solution could help you and your team to develop some more sleek and quantifiable ESG assessments that will help you to source smarter, safer, but also more sustainably. Finally, we will save 5 minutes towards the end for a Q&A session. And this then attendees will be able to ask questions that you have about the day's content or our solution. And if you have a question during the session that pops up, don't wait to ask it. Feel free to write it down in the chat bubble, and we will try to put as many of those together and answer those questions at the end of the session today. Again, there will be polls during the session, so keep your fingers ready and your minds ready to be able to respond to a few of those. Without any further ado, let's get into the day's content. To start, I think it's really important that we just take a second to look in the mirror. Many of you in attendance today are working in procurement, sourcing, sustainability, quality, or supply chain functions based upon what you've left on your submissions. Though you may not feel like it, our team at Kodiak Hub truly believes that you hold some of the most powerful positions in the entire value chain. This classic Porter value chain of the 80s, it's shifting pretty much. Procurement, sourcing, and supply chain are becoming increasingly primary functions. Sustainability has evolved from a business discipline to an integrated strategy, which is really being applied in the organization across functions to realize social, financial, and environmental change in all aspects of the business. I'll say it again, your functions are increasingly business critical. You select and manage suppliers, you ensure the quality of products and services, you safeguard brand value, you govern the many tiers of your supply chain at scale, and you manage the spend. What I'm trying to tell you here is you hold a lot more influence than you might know, or maybe you do know it. You hold the spend, you hold the power. Every day, you guys make buying decisions that can create a significant and scaling global impact. Every day, you can choose to make investments with suppliers with ESG in mind or not. There's a quote that I was thinking about when putting together the content for this particular webinar today that I love. It's by Miles Davis, and I think it's quite fitting. He once said, Sometimes you have to play a long time to be able to play like yourself. With that, I ask the question, what tune do you and your team want to be remembered for playing? Let's make sure during today's session that we give you the tools and the tips necessary to make sure that it's a tune that we can all be proud of. So let's start at square one. What in the heck is ESG? Many of you probably already know, but defining ESG can be complex, considering that the breadth and depth of the acronym goes far beyond the 3 letters. I'm a fan of this definition by Investopedia. Environmental social governance, known as ESG criteria, these are a set of standards for a company's operation that socially conscious investors use to screen potential investments. ESG criteria can help us to look far beyond the bottom line. ESG investments are buying decisions deeply rooted in a more holistic view of value and value creation. ESG, as we know it, is a discipline that's founded on the notion that a company, a supplier, or your organization is a living ecosystem, an organism with a complexity that's far more nuanced than simply being a source of financial success. It suggests that environmental, social, and corporate governance factors have a significant impact on the overall value of a company, including risks to be mitigated and also opportunities to be gained. The 5 pillars of ESG that you should be, of course, keeping in mind with anything that you're doing with your ESG work are these on screen: employees, customers, communities at scale, shareholders, and environment. As put by Mike Walters, who's the CEO of USA Financial, identifying the impact, positive or negative, on these 5 stakeholders is what should become the measuring stick for a good ESG investment. I want to stop here and ask a poll now, our first poll of the day, and start it off with asking which element of ESG metrics are most crucial for you right now. I'm curious. So we'll ask that first poll. Again, which elements of ESG metrics are most crucial for you right now? The responses are rolling in fast and furious. And it seems like no matter the responses that continue to roll in, environment takes the cake with about almost 65 to 70% of the share. Social elements and corporate governance tied, in fact, at 15%. And it's fluctuating with the more people that are responding, but about 70, 15, 15 is the breakdown: environment to social and to corporate governance. Very interesting to see, of course, that the main focus right now is in fact on environment, which is not a big shocker because it's a difficult and a complex question as well related to ESG. To identify the impact of your corporate investments on these 5 stakeholders, typically within ESG aspects, you'd like to follow the money, and this leads us on a path directly to procurement. And procurement as a function is committed to positive growth and sustainable development. Many of you probably see this within your organization. According to the 2020 Ovation Pulse, 92% of CPOs responded that they remain committed to long-term goals, and those are then focused on supplier-enabled innovation, sustainability through ESG goals, as well as agility through digitalization, all of which will enable the business to deliver on its growth agenda. Commitment from procurement is absolutely fantastic, and it's a great starting point, of course, but in order to truly deliver on these long-term goals, procurement teams will need to shift their priorities, sacrifice some of the traditional procurement methods that have brought them to where they are today, acquire maybe some greater transformation and technology budgets, which is not always the simplest things to do, we know. But of course, some things that you can do from a softer perspective is definitely build a culture that excites change, and also have a willingness to be able to change processes and adopt modern solutions as a means to speed up on time delivery within some of these ambitious objectives that your companies are setting out within an ESG space. So the next poll we want to actually be able to ask to everyone before we get into the next bit of the session today is, do you currently utilize a solution? Have you adopted a solution to manage ESG assessments? We'll hop out to be able to now see what the poll is. Responses are rolling in. Please respond if you haven't already. Yes or no, very simple question. Are you utilizing a solution to manage ESG assessments? I guess I'm not incredibly surprised by the response values. It seems like of the 30-something respondents, only about 20-something have responded here, 25 people in total, but that's okay. For those of you that don't want to respond, that's totally fine. The response is 72% no, 28% yes, which is probably why we're here today, of course, so we can be able to better understand, what type of solutions are out there for ESG assessment. But it's something that, of course, I find to be a little bit surprising, as there is a lot of solutions out there on the market. So we'll definitely focus in on how we could be able to help you today, and also how we can give you some tips to get started before you're ready to adopt a solution. Getting into another kind of fascinating space is the fact that chief procurement officers seem to be shifting their priorities. So this is a focus right now. Everybody knows it. There is a mandate really to implement initiatives tied to ESG, and this is mirrored in some of the recent results as seen in the CPO planning guide from 2021 reported by procurement leaders. CPOs gave supply chain sustainability a ranking on the initiative list of 7.2, which was an entire point above what it was within 2020. So we see that this is a trend that just isn't going away, and it's continuing to be a bigger task for procurement teams to be able to take on. This is, of course, an affirmation that procurement leaders understand the importance of being a role player in the broader sustainability initiatives and sustainable development goals. And in 2022, following up on ESG metrics, of course, was also something that was a focus here. This is going to be founded in a lot of legislation, as we see. The main three legislation bits that we have seen during the last 3 years are really these three on screen right now. One, which is the EU disclosure regulation, quickly was passed in 2019. This requires firms in the financial services sector to make strategic business and policy decisions regarding their approach to ESG, and that they need to be able to disclose this information on their website and in pre-contractual and periodic disclosures. The second is that the EU taxonomy, of course, this is that toolkit that has been given everyone to be able to meet the EU Green Deal and ensure that corporate entities are able to report in an environmentally sustainable manner. And then the final one, Lieferkettengesetz. Sorry, my German is bad. Lieferkettengesetz. I can't say it very well one way or the other. It's the German Supply Chain Act, this one that was passed just last February in 2021, which is putting requirements on large German organizations, those over 3,000 employees to start with, and then actually stepping down to organizations with only 1,000 employees. And this is, forcing companies into taking responsibility for their global supply chains with a means for enhanced due diligence, corporate governance, and really to have a means for reporting upon violations within various social, environmental, and financial criteria. So there's no doubt that there's an importance of ESG and a commitment from professionals just like yourselves to make ESG synonymous with the day-to-day operations. But as the saying goes, you can't really manage what you can't measure. And what you can't measure, of course, it's pretty hard to improve upon. So with that, our team at Kodiak Hub would like to offer you 10 tips to build cool and quantifiable ESG assessments. The first tip that we're offering up today, something that many probably know, but have a clear code of conduct, policies, and expectations within your ESG assessments. There's no reason to try and reinvent the wheel. The criteria and content of your ESG assessments should be rooted in international standards, domestic legislation, global legislation, and your own business critical goals. The starting point really for any ESG assessment should be your existing supplier code of conduct corporate policies, and the relevant standards for your industry or your geographical segment. This is no surprise to you, I'm sure, but it's important to remember that there are an increasing number of requirements that new legislations, standards, and customer demands are putting into place. And as standards evolve, we have to make sure that the requirements of your supplier code of conduct, as well as your assessments and policies, are also evolving. The foundation of ESG assessment should be content pulled directly from your code of conduct and vice versa. I know that stringent guidelines and policies and rules aren't always the most fun way to start a collaboration with a new supplier, but it's definitely a necessary starting point to ensure that you're encouraging sustainable modes of operation prior to collaboration with a new supplier and ongoing during your collaboration with your suppliers. So on to tip number 2. Work ESG into your onboarding and pre-qualification. As we just pointed out, it's important, of course, to ensure that you're encouraging these sustainable modes of operating from the start, making sure that ESG metrics are part of the criteria that you address within your onboarding or pre-qualification allows you to really immediately gauge the potential risks and opportunities that exist within some type of future collaboration that you might have. We see in some of the responses from the procurement leader's CPO Compass in 2022 that 75% of CPOs actually responded that one of the top actions they plan to take to address ESG goals is to work sustainability due diligence into operational sourcing processes. In the same survey, 79% responded that they plan to implement a wider set of sustainability KPIs on scorecards, and 62% responded that they plan to implement a more systematic approach to sustainability reporting from suppliers. I mean, ESG assessment, as we see it, is much more than a checkbox. It's a means for evaluating metrics and allocating spend with suppliers that are able to uphold the standards that your stakeholders expect and deserve. To make sure that your ESG assessments becomes much more than a checkbox, of course, you're gonna need to make sure that you're able to turn your supplier information into intelligence. And that gives you then the means, of course, to turn that intelligence into ongoing improvement, which leads then into tip number 3, how you can start turning some of this information into intelligence. A starting point is really to make your assessments multiple choice. This might seem a bit mundane, but really designing good questions is a pivotal element when utilizing assessments to their full potential. Content is the centerpiece of your ESG assessment. The results that you're obtaining from suppliers are going to be contingent upon the way that you're asking the questions, the quality of the questions, and your approach to these individual questions. So you always need to start by asking yourself, why are we asking this question? You need to focus, of course, on asking questions that can be used to drive performance towards a desired goal or improvement. Questions should be reflected and something relevant, something that you can be able to measure in one way or another, and it should be kind of a proponent of your overall business goals or your organization's KPIs. Utilizing multiple choice methodology as a basis for your assessments provides respondents with fixed answers, and providing multiple choice can implicitly communicate to your suppliers your expectations. A yes/no compliance-based question, can be very valuable where it's very clear what the requirements are to be met. For example, uploading a document and marking an expiry date, on an ISO certification or alike. Multiple choice questions also provide an embryo to turning qualitative responses into quantitative intelligence. So the next poll that I wanted to be able to send out to the audience today is actually about these multiple choice versus open-ended questions, because we're intrigued by this whenever we start working with companies. Do you currently have open-ended response alternatives in your ESG assessments? The question is not about having multiple choice, but rather, do you have open-ended responses in your ESG assessments? Always, never, often, or sometimes. The responses are rolling in here, it seems. Once we have a majority of the responses, we can be able to give everybody some results. Seems like the voting has stopped around there. Of about 20 responses, often actually comes out on top with 42%. Sometimes and never, 25% apiece, kind of shared with the vote there, as well as then always is only 5%. And this is something that's a hot topic, something that we talk about a lot with any new customer you start working with. It's not bad to have open-ended questions, but it's more difficult, of course, again, to turn that information, turn that qualitative response into some type of intelligence in the output. So it's great to be able to gather back that information when you need it. But of course, when you want to be able to quantify, you want to make sure that you're pushing those questions into some type of a multiple choice methodology. The reason why, of course, is because it helps you to really adopt the next aspect, which is a rating methodology. Tip number 4 on our list is to adopt a rating methodology that works for you. And ratings, offer procurement teams really a simple buying traffic signal. Your job is complicated enough. It's nice to sometimes make things a little bit simpler. Stop and go, or stop and investigate, proceeding for caution, or go for it, right? Ratings make analysis and decision making a little bit simpler, but it also requires your team to not leave their heads at home. What we want to be able to do now is actually stop for another poll and just quickly ask, before we get into our definition of a rating methodology, do you currently have a rating methodology for your ESG assessments? It could be anything as simple as a 1 to 5, a RAG score, or a like. So we'll stop here and just ask the question, do you have a rating methodology for your ESG assessments, or are you just gathering back information in that case, rather than building insights and intelligence about the responses that are coming in? Interesting. 80% right now with 21 responses. I know that not everybody has responded, but as they continue to roll in, it's kind of staying the same. 80% of respondents said no, they do not have a rating methodology. All right, well then we might be able to change your mind about why it's important and how you could be able to build a nice rating methodology that can help you, of course, to be able to spot risks and opportunity related to your ESG assessments. So building question sets and adopting a rating methodology requires first, of course, a definition of your supplier KPIs and acceptance criteria for really what is excellent, good, satisfactory, and poor. ESG KPIs should, of course, be unique to your individual company based upon your own strategy, company goals, and corporate strategy. So really, once you're determined your KPIs, your questions, your acceptance criteria, then you're able to start putting weights upon those particular response values. So a simple 1 to 5 or a simple red, amber, green, known as a RAG scoring, are some of the great and easy first steps to really being able to build a rating framework. As seen on screen, and we'll demonstrate in just a bit, Kodiak Hub suggests utilizing a 0 to 100% scale to be able to provide different thresholds, but also a more nuanced rating profile. So we'll move in then to tip number 5 and run through these different tips to make sure that we actually get into the demonstration in good time. And number 5 is enabling a flagging framework. Building a more holistic view of your suppliers by defining and assessing a really wide criteria of ESG KPIs will, of course, help you to spot risks and opportunities faster, especially if these assessments are building instant intelligence with some type of a rating methodology like we just said. But with this said, it's important also, of course, to have really simple mechanisms in place that will help you to quickly identify potential ESG risks. Kodiak Hub solution features a flagging system, and we believe whether you're still working in an Excel format, that you should have this type of a flagging system wherever it is in your ESG assessments. And this provides you and your team with a simple way to pretty much highlight and predefine the importance of mandatory requirements that you're putting out to suppliers and preset those sub-criteria to flag your attention when responses roll in and your expectations aren't in fact met to a satisfactory level. Again, I mean, ESG goes far beyond the 3 words, environmental, social, and governance. A supplier could be excellent really within 19 of 20 requirement areas, but the one requirement area where they aren't compliant could be a complete and utter deal breaker, right? It's nice to be able to spot those potential problem suppliers and vendors fast, and the flagging capability gives you the opportunity to do so. Number 6 is really putting some of this, information and intelligence that you're gathering to work, right? When you do spot a risk or an opportunity, it's always good to address it quickly. And addressing ESG is a really important first step to, making this much more than just a checklist. It's where an assessment goes from being a checklist to being really an action plan. Our solution itself features a collaboration space for managing corrective and development focused actions, managing buyer to supplier comms, sharing documents, providing a backlog and history of activities, and moving along the review process of corrective actions, and also then providing kind of a reposited view of the collaboration in a centralized scorecard, as well as within an overview of your actions. And the ability really to issue actions and reposit this communication alongside the responses and results from a supplier's ESG assessment within our scorecards is a really important feature that we have to make responsible sourcing decisions more process dependent and less person dependent. I mean, how often has something happen within an ESG assessment and somebody reaches out to a supplier via mail and they get back documentation in their inbox and they forget to upload it in the share drive? This is taking away all of that potential human error and making things a lot more streamlined. Again, turning your assessment from just being into a checklist, a to-do, really into some type of an action plan, so you can be able to utilize it to improve over time within your supplier base. Leading into tip number 7, a hot button issue really that everyone should be thinking about if you're not already, and this is supplier diversity. It's really time to do something about it. Taken from the 2022 CPO Compass survey by procurement leaders, as seen on screen, it was reported by 79% of CPOs that they will seek to improve supplier diversity and inclusion by tracking their expenditure within Tier 2 diverse suppliers in 2022, while 62% plan to revise supplier selection criteria to enable more diverse enterprises to win business. The majority of the procurement teams that Kodiak Hub has the opportunity to speak with on a daily basis are referencing to supplier diversity as a main focus area for ESG reporting. And we believe that you should be as well if you're not already. Supplier diversity starts with a better understanding of your supply chain. And you can gain this really by implementing a simple process to segment your suppliers and leveraging this information to then roll out supplier diversity programs and put those into place to enhance inclusive spend, of course, but also to inspire diversity in your own supplier organizations. Then I actually wanted to pause here as well for a poll as well to just quickly ask, who is working with supplier diversity? Do you currently assess and report on supplier diversity as an aspect of your ESG assessments or the work that you're doing within ESG? Yes or no? All right, the responses are rolling in. I can already see that it's overwhelmingly a no response of the respondents that have reported in. 88% right now at no, 11 at yes. So maybe we'll be able to inspire you a little bit of some simple ways, as you see on screen here, working a simple segmentation into the supplier diversity. This is a simple way to be able to do so within your onboarding of your suppliers or your ongoing assessment. And to be able to give you an understanding of what a diverse supplier is, of course, there's great definitions that you can find. Some common examples of diverse suppliers are small business enterprises, minority-owned business enterprises, women-owned business enterprises, and over time as well, this is expanded to LGBTQ, veterans, and other proprietary groups with disabilities as well. Inclusive spend and supplier diversity really benefits the underrepresented businesses, but also it's an ability for you guys to be able to uplift communities where their businesses are lacking wages or tax revenue. You control the spend really, right? So you control the power. and you bear the responsibility with that. Identifying opportunities to empower diverse suppliers directly and positively impacts these 5 pillar stakeholders that we mentioned at the beginning of this session. Enhancing supplier diversity is really all about creating shared value and economic impact at scale. So we'll get into the number 8 tip on our list, which is more about the supplier, which is improving the supplier experience. I'm going to ask a rhetorical question here. Do you think that a supplier likes receiving lengthy Excel questionnaires? I'm not expecting an answer, of course, but I mean, if you're planning on putting your ESG assessments under the lens, then it's important that we start by ensuring that both parties, yourself as well as the supplier, experience some type of ease of collaboration. Modern solutions can be able to help you give this supplier experience, a lift, which is equally as important as your own. If a supplier, perceives you as a customer as one that's easy to work with, then chances are they will be more likely to engage in a collaboration. I mean, your success often depends on the willingness of a supplier to collaborate, to report, to lean in, right? I mean, make sure that your ESG assessments are removing the barriers standing in the way of a supplier, engaging and enable them really. I mean, this is something that could be as simple as, offering a sleeker interface for the supplier to report back on, clear guidance in your messaging or the expectations you have. Status bars, right, or timelines that are clearly built in to the assessments, or for the ability for the supplier, to quickly delegate opportunities or activities to other users, right? Things like auto save and alike. I mean, it's super simple types of things that can be able to really enrich the user experience of a supplier and make sure that they're going to be on board for reporting back on these assessments, because it takes them time as well. And of course, making sure that they get some value out of it is also important. Moving on into tip number 9 on our list of ways to build cool and quantifiable ESG assessments. Like we said, I mean, ESG assessments take time. They take time for you guys to develop. They also take time for the supplier to respond upon, right? The last thing that you want for your suppliers to be questioning the importance of the assessment. So when making, cool and quantifiable ESG assessments, we need to make sure that we're answering upon the 4 R's: rationale, relevancy, responsiveness, and recognition. Rationale, I mean, make sure that your suppliers know the importance of ESG assessment and reporting. Remind them that ESG KPI management isn't about you or me, right? It's about creating shared value and a new standard really for supply chain sustainability. A relevancy, right? Hold your suppliers accountable for ESG standards that are relevant in relation to them, their size, their location, their category, strategic importance, and other factors that you might think of, right? IT suppliers shouldn't be responding to questions about reach and rows, just like packaging suppliers shouldn't be responding to metrics on log J4 security. Keep it relevant, right? Responsiveness, make sure that if you have the means to feed back reports to response to your ESG assessments, then do so. Based upon their input, they have a way to be able to see how they can improve, where they're doing well, where they might be lacking. And this is where, of course, modern solutions and also this rating methodology can help you to quickly share insights with your supplier about how they're doing and how they can maybe do a little bit better. The last element is recognition, right? I mean, don't be afraid to highlight your top performers. They've done great. Let them know it, post about them on social media, highlight them in your sustainability report, mention them or reward them during an annual supplier day, something of that sort, just make sure really that the value add from an ESG assessment is reciprocated. You're gaining a lot of value from these responses. Make sure that your suppliers are also gaining value. Moving into the final tip before we offer up some practical examples during the demonstration of the Kodiak Hub solution. The last bit is separating compliance from performance. I mean, it's important to gauge a wide range of environmental, social, and corporate governance criteria in your assessments. We've talked about this earlier, but the one thing that you don't want to start mixing together is business practices or levels of compliance with your output, performance, and results. having a supplier diversity program in place is very different from providing a breakdown of how much of a supply chain is in fact included within diverse spend, right? Having documented environmental management system in place is very different from actual reporting upon waste for water and electricity. And these lists can go on, right? Compliance is one thing, performance is another. Evaluating supplier performance is a crucial part of driving improvements, on delivery, price, innovation, collaboration, and also upon sustainability performance, like, emissions, diversity, waste management, and so much more. Kodiak Hub's solution leverages both ESG compliance and performance to help our users to gain a holistic view of their suppliers in aggregated rating profiles, but we also help them to compartmentalize these two activities, right? Self-assessments in one bit, performance evaluations in the other. And we're able to offer them then more granular abilities to analyze their suppliers, but also show them these aggregated views within scorecards that are taking in consideration both the management, but also the actual output. So there you have it, our 10 tips for building cool and quantifiable ESG assessments, giving you guys the means that you need, of course, to maybe inspire each other, but also to implement some more sustainable procurement practices, hopefully, as well. What we'll then shift over to now is actually a demonstration of the Kodiak Hub solution. So hang on for those of you that are able to do so for a little bit longer, and we're actually going to demonstrate the solution right now to be able to just give a little view of how a modern solution like Kodiak Hub could be able to help you and your company to be able to build more simple, sleek, as well as quantifiable ESG assessments. Let me just shift over my screen here then. I hope everybody's able to see it. It's sharing, as it says. Upon logging into the solution, we're able to see our suppliers around the globe. We are able to get instantly a macro risk index to point us in the direction of some contextual risks that might exist in a particular country. We can, of course, hover over particular suppliers on this view, and we can also be able to segment out this view based upon our different typifications as we would like to in that case. I just want to take a detour as you can jump into a scorecard of a supplier from that view, but here I wanted to just show off quickly the supplier list overview. This is where then you can put that rating methodology to use. Whoops, sorry, I got logged out there as I've been logged in too long and not doing anything. So here again, you can be able to put that rating methodology to use, as you see here. It's kind of an overarching element of the solution throughout the solution. So you can be able to quickly find segments of the suppliers, not only based upon their typifications or their categories, their approval level, their flagging level, but also on how they're doing, top, but also bottom performers, and find them very quickly as well in that case. Talking about getting the data into our solution, it's super simple. You're, of course, not adding these manually. Imports from a CSV file or XLSX file, as well as then API integrations. Those are the two ways that most people share their supplier data. The data points that are required is a name and ID, a country, as well as an email. From those data points, you can start pushing work to the suppliers themselves to report back on different types of elements that are important to you guys, whether that's, more basic onboarding questions, but also things that might be focused on ESG. Just jumping into a supplier scorecard so we give a little bit better view of what you can be able to do on a supplier profile. Here then we have all of the different data properties that are associated with a supplier, which we can search for fast. We can update as we need to. We can also be able to take notes, say that I need to manually change the flagging level of a supplier. Well, then I can be able to do so, and I can be able to then directly here also take a note and leave that note for myself or for another user, who it is that's been, why it is that I've left this the supplier and why I've updated it. And also then it gives me an audit trail of when it's been taken, who it is also that's left that particular message. The thing that I want to focus in on today is the sustainability and governance rating. This is 14 different standardized areas where our customers can be able to choose sub-criteria related to these particular areas. The sub-criteria then, of course, have questions associated with them. Those questions have responses associated with them. Those responses also then have values associated with them, or weighting, which is then leading to this overall rating, as you see here. This is then a great way for our customers within their onboarding, but also their ongoing assessment of their suppliers to be able to quickly ask the questions that they need to, utilizing then also those multiple choice values, which are qualitative responses, to be able to get some type of quantitative results. The rating methodology also helps our customers to be able to view history over time. Is a supplier getting better? Are they getting worse as well? And it also gives you the levels of granularity that you need, right? In something like performance, for example, to be able to track, how the price changes have been over time, or the price competitiveness. You can be able to quickly do these types of things. And it's the same thing with the elements related to governance of the supplier base as well. You can be able to see, is a supplier getting better? Are they getting worse? But when you zoom out, of course, you can also be able to see in an overall view how they're doing. So it gives you different levels of granularity to dig in as you need to, and then also be able to see that historical value. Is a supplier progressing or not? These third-party insights we see on the right-hand side here, such as credit score, some media bits as well. I'm not going to go into these as they're not really in scope for ESG assessment, but there's different types of third-party insights, as well as then a sanctions and PEP overview, which gives general information, some subsidiaries linked to this company, as well as then politically exposed persons, for any type of really deep due diligence that you guys are doing on new vendors or existing vendors as well. The things that I do want to focus on are the assessments, audits, and evaluations. Those are the previous results you see here. And these are then also the documents that have been shared with you. So you can be able to quickly find different documents, whether they're, certifications, if they are commercial documents as well, you can be able to keep those on file here. So you can be able to directly then understand when a supplier's documentation is going to, in fact, expire, get notified about this. You can upload documents yourself, download them yourself as well. But of course, then it's keeping this kind of typification on the sharing of the documentation. Yes, this is factoring into the environmental management sector criteria as well, giving back a response value. But it's also then helping you to quickly reposit the information and giving you then an understanding of the expiry date as well as who it is that updated this particular information. So how is it that you're getting all of these great insights, right? Well, you're able to do so very quickly by building your templates, your questionnaires for your assessment in the assessments functionality. This is for the same for self-assessment as it is for on-site audit checklists, as it is for performance evaluation, really the same workflow for a user in that case. You're able to build drafts that can then be activated by users that have the rights to do so. In a draft format, this is where you can be able to build, and you can do so, that is relevant to a type of supplier, so that you're making sure that you're typifying these and asking them to the correct types of suppliers. You can choose these rating areas, all of the 14, or you could only be able to, assess a supplier on 3 or 4 of them, if that's what's in line with your business strategy associated with ESG, right? So that's really up to you in that case. The data check, you could be able to quickly then get in different data points based upon the different types of information that you want a supplier to be able to update for you. Quickly drag and drop in and out different data properties that you already have mapped into the solution to be able to have updated. If the supplier receives this and they already have their data, right, then they can be able to just check off that it's complete and it's correct data. The content area, this is where you're able to then build out your message to the supplier on a landing page that the supplier will then be able to receive, that they get when you roll out these campaigns of the assessment. When it comes to individual areas, you can quickly move them around as you would like to, and underneath the individual areas, ask the individual questions that you need to ask. This is what we call attributes. Super simple. So attributes are pretty much desired, activities by a supplier, or an implicit kind of ask to the supplier that this should be in place if it's not, right? You can have conditional logic between these different attributes as well. So show the next question if yes or no, right, the value before. So you could be able to set these up and really have it be an interactive experience for the supplier as well. Once you're then happy with the different types of data that you're gathering back, the question sets you're asking to get back response values, as well as then the documentation that you need to keep on file to remain compliant, you're able to then build out your emails. You can build up to 5 emails, so you can be able to schedule these out later. And here, then you're able to determine whether the supplier is going to get a message in that email, and you can be able to make sure that this looks like it and feels like it's coming from you. Add a subject line that's going to be enticing that they're going to open, and then you're ready to publish this particular assessment. I already have plenty of assessments published, so I'm not going to publish this one, but what I am going to do is show you a preview. This is what the view would be for the supplier. So again, focusing on the supplier user experience, just as important as focusing on your user experience. Them being able to report back very simply in the way that, that to answer on the questions that you find to be important, well, that's pretty important. So they can be able to, along the way, give different responses, whether it's integers, whether it's open-ended, whether it's, based upon these multi-select or single select. They can report back with documentation that you're asking them for, as well as expiry dates. We also see the conditional logic here. You can have multi-select as well within these particular assessments. So you're able to then really build this up in a way that's both catering to your company, catering to the type of supplier, but also catering to your overall strategy when it's coming to ESG. How in-depth you want to be, how in-depth you want to be within the question sets, and also how it is that you want to be able to determine the values are behind these particular question sets. When it comes to the front end, what do you start seeing? Well, that's where you start seeing results. When results start rolling back in from the campaigns, then you're going to be able to see the reports. But first, you might need to send these out, as I realize. So if it's then a self-assessment we're rolling out, we can be able to name this and typify it. We can choose then the template that we have built. We can set an absolute campaign deadline, so this will not be able to be responded back to past that date. We can then add suppliers into this campaign. We can then typify, to make sure that, for example, okay, actually this is going to be ESG assessment going to strategic suppliers. Great, then we know that, and then we can be able to choose the type of suppliers that are going to be receiving this. We can select all of those filtered suppliers, we can add them into the campaign, and then we can quickly schedule out the emails. So one will roll out now, follow-up will roll out in a few weeks, and a final call a few weeks after that. This is then rolling out a drip campaign. You can add attachments, of course, here, code of conduct or other requirements that you have upon the supplier, right? And the drip campaign then rolls out to let your suppliers know that they need to respond. And when they do respond, it stops sending to them. But if they don't respond, they open the email, they click it in the assessment, you're going to be able to have an idea of that as well. So you're staying on top of these assessments with some email marketing technology in the back end. The last bit then is the reports. That's where you're able to start spotting discrepancies or top performing suppliers when these responses start rolling in. So you can be able to see in a list format very quickly a flag supplier. You can also see a quick view of the different sections they've responded back to. And you can also dive into a deeper report as well to see why it is this particular supplier has been flagged. And here then we start also seeing the rating methodology with the particular question sets associated with the responses and the responses associated with then different values that are then creating an average in each of these individual sections and averaging up altogether as an overall score. There's different ways that you can be able to weight these question sets against each other, the subsections against each other, these individual criteria against each other, so forth and so on. So it, of course, then meets your guys' goals. Sharing this with the supplier, you can be able to export to sleek results, but you can also just do things as simple as sharing a URL to that supplier. So I could be able to copy and paste this into an email or into the action space as well, where I might want to be able to just, communicate back and forth with the supplier and say, hey, I've seen that you haven't signed your code of conduct, please upload that, but here's also a link to your, to your assessment results so you can be able to improve on X, Y, and Z. Very simple way for you to be able to collaborate in this space as well. And then the analytics is a great way for you to be able to start getting some overviews of this data. I mean, it's simple ways that you can toggle on or off different widgets to start seeing breakdowns and, potential suppliers that are in potential areas such as high risk. different things like the engagement or the overall correlations between ratings, as well as then see things here like top and bottom performers as we see. And you can choose then particular rating areas. So we see, who's our top and bottom within health and safety management, we can quickly be able to toggle to. And as we showed within some of the slides as well, some of these compare and contrast functionalities to quickly look at different suppliers, who's doing well, who's doing poorly. The overall progression, as well as then elements that are, important for auditing, compliance tracking, who's compliant, who's not with the different documents shared, really putting this information to work, right? You're gathering a lot of information, you're gathering a lot of documentation. You want to make sure that you're able to actually get some value out of it and also utilize it to drive improvement within your organization.